Welcome to Karen Stories, where the wildest Karen encounters unfold. Get ready for hilarious, unbelievable, and shocking moments as Karens make the most outrageous demands. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to never miss a crazy story. Let's dive in. I should have known something was off the moment I heard that voice, sharp, shrill, and laced with entitlement so thick you could bottle it up and sell it as perfume for the overly self-important. Hello, 911? Yes, I need to report a crime. A crime? My stomach clenched as I turned toward the sound. Was someone being robbed? A fight breaking out? My mind raced through the possibilities, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of the situation. Karen stood there, phone pressed to her ear with the dramatic fervor of someone reporting a hostage crisis. Her short, bottle blonde hair was perfectly sprayed into a shape that defied both gravity and logic. She wore oversized sunglasses despite the cloudy sky, and her floral print blouse fluttered with indignation as she gestured wildly at, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me. At a kid. A kid selling lemonade." The air left my lungs in a sharp exhale. I wasn't the only one who noticed. A few other people in the neighborhood had turned to watch the spectacle unfold, expressions shifting from confusion to collective secondhand embarrassment. The little boy, maybe 10 years old, stood frozen behind his small table, clutching a cup of his own lemonade like it was some sort of shield. A hastily drawn sign in bright yellow crayon read, "Lemonade, 50 cents," and underneath, in wobbly handwriting, "Help me buy a new bike." "Ma'am," I heard the dispatcher's voice crackle faintly from Karen's phone. "Can you describe the nature of the emergency?" Karen scoffed as if the question itself was offensive. "Yes, I can. There's an illegal business operating on my street. I demand immediate action." Illegal business. She said it like the kid was laundering money for the mob, instead of handing out Dixie cups of lukewarm lemonade to passing joggers. The boy's mother, who had been watching from their porch, finally stepped forward, her face a mixture of disbelief and barely restrained fury. "Excuse me?" she snapped, marching right up to Karen. "Are you seriously calling the police on my son?" Karen turned, looking her up and down as if deciding whether she was worth acknowledging. "Your son is running an unlicensed food and beverage operation," she said, crossing her arms. "It's a health code violation. And a zoning violation. And frankly, it's a nuisance." The mother blinked, clearly struggling to process the sheer level of idiocy she was dealing with. "A nuisance? He's a kid selling lemonade. What kind of person? I have rights." Karen shrieked, cutting her off. "I pay taxes. I will not have this kind of lawlessness in my neighborhood." At this point, I knew I should probably walk away. This was Karen logic. It didn't bend. It didn't break, it simply crushed reality under its ridiculous weight. But like a moth drawn to a particularly stupid flame, I couldn't help myself. "Karen," I said, stepping closer. "You do realize you're calling the cops on a child, right? A child who's just trying to buy himself a bike." Karen whirled on me so fast her sunglasses nearly flew off. "And who are you to get involved?" She snapped. "Another one of these bleeding hearts who thinks rules don't apply? What if I opened a restaurant on my front lawn? Would you let me get away with that?" I pinched the bridge of my nose, inhaling deeply. "That is not the same thing. At all." She ignored me and turned back to the phone. "Yes, officer, I'm still here. I do feel threatened, actually. The mother is becoming hostile. I am concerned for my safety." "Oh, for the love of..." The boy's mother took a step forward, her hands clenched at her sides. "You're concerned for your safety? You're the one harassing a child?" Karen gasped, clutching her chest like she'd just been personally victimized by the truth. That's when I saw it, the blue and red lights flashing at the end of the street. The police were actually coming. Oh, this was about to get interesting. The police car rolled closer, its sirens mercifully silent, but the unmistakable authority of flashing red and blue slicing through the peaceful afternoon. My stomach twisted in a mixture of amusement and sheer disbelief. This was happening. This was actually happening. Karen, on the other hand, straightened up like she had just been appointed sheriff of the neighborhood watch. She flipped her sunglasses up onto her head and smoothed down her blouse, adopting the self-satisfied air of someone who had been personally responsible for restoring law and order to the community. I wanted to scream. The officer stepped out of the squad car, clearly not in any particular rush. He was a middle-aged man with the look of someone who had seen far too much nonsense in his career and was already regretting stepping out of his vehicle. His partner, a younger officer, lingered near the car, exchanging a glance with his superior that all but screamed. "You're taking this one, right?" Karen practically lunged toward them. "Oh, thank goodness you're here, officer," she exclaimed, hands clasped in a theatrical show of relief. I was beginning to fear for my safety. The officer held up a hand, clearly in no mood for dramatics. "All right, ma'am," he said, exhaling slowly. "Why don't you tell me exactly what's going on here?" Karen let out a breathy gasp, then pointed an accusatory finger at the lemonade stand. "That child is running an unlicensed food and beverage operation. It's an absolute health code violation and a disturbance to the neighborhood." The officer blinked, then turned his gaze slowly, painfully to the small, rickety table where the kid still stood, clutching his pitcher of lemonade like he was awaiting execution. The silence stretched. The officer's nostrils flared ever so slightly. "That's the emergency?" he asked, voice flat. "Yes." Karen huffed, seemingly insulted by the implication that this wasn't the crime of the century. "And that woman?" She jabbed a manicured nail toward the boy's mother, who had been standing there with her arms crossed. Radiating pure, barely contained fury, became hostile when I tried to address the issue civilly. Civilly. I nearly choked on my own tongue. The officer let out a long-suffering sigh, the kind only a man who has been called to break up PTA fights and homeowners association disputes could produce. He rubbed his temples. "Ma'am," he said, voice strained with forced patience. "Are you telling me that you called 911 because a kid is selling lemonade?" Karen pursed her lips, looking absolutely offended at his tone. "It's illegal," she insisted. "There are laws. There are permits. And how do we know what's even in that lemonade? He could be putting anything in there." At this, the kid who had been watching the insanity unfold with wide, terrified eyes lifted his pitcher and read the ingredients out loud. Lemon juice. Sugar. And, water." Karen scoffed. "Oh, sure, that's what they always say." I pinched the bridge of my nose so hard I saw colors. The officer's jaw tightened. His patience was hanging by a thread. "So, let me get this straight," he said. "You called emergency services, the number reserved for actual crises, because you didn't like that a kid was selling lemonade?" Karen crossed her arms. "If you won't enforce the law, who will?" Karen's face contorted like she had just been personally betrayed by the Constitution itself. "A ticket?" she screeched, her voice climbing several octaves into a register only audible to dogs and deeply annoyed police officers. "You're giving me a ticket? For what? For being a law-abiding citizen?" The officer barely glanced at her as he scribbled on his notepad. "For misusing emergency services," he said flatly. "You called 911 over a lemonade stand, ma'am. That's a violation." Karen gasped, placing a dramatic hand over her chest as if he had just accused her of a heinous crime. "Misusing? I was trying to uphold the law. The law is the law, and if you refuse to do your job, that's enough, ma'am," the officer said, his patience wearing so thin I half expected it to snap and take out everyone within a 10-foot radius. "This isn't up for debate." Karen's eyes darted around, looking for an ally, someone, anyone, to step in and validate her ridiculousness. Her gaze locked onto me. "Oh no. Oh no, you," she snapped, pointing a manicured finger at me like I was on trial. "You saw it. You know this is illegal. Tell him." I blinked, swallowed, took a deep breath. Then, very carefully, said, "Karen, it's a 10-year-old selling lemonade in front of his house. He's not running a drug cartel." Wrong answer. Karen's face twisted in pure outrage. Oh, so you're on their side? I see how it is. You people just want anarchy. First, it's illegal lemonade, then what? A hot dog stand? A rogue bake sale? Where does it end?" The crowd that had gathered was no longer just watching. They were enjoying this. A few people chuckled under their breath, others openly grinning at the sheer absurdity. The little boy behind the lemonade stand, sensing that he was somehow at the center of something big, looked between us all with wide, fascinated eyes. The officer handed Karen the ticket. "Sign here." Karen snatched it like it personally offended her, glaring at the paper as if she could set it ablaze through sheer willpower alone. "This is unbelievable," she ranted as she scribbled her signature. "I have lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. I have always followed the rules. And now, I'm being punished for caring about my community." The officer took back the ticket, nodding. You're free to go." Karen's mouth flapped uselessly, like she wanted to argue further but couldn't quite figure out how to push back against basic logic. And then, the kid, the absolute legend of a kid, decided to add fuel to the fire. He cleared his throat. Would you like to buy some lemonade before you go?" The crowd lost it. Someone actually clapped. A man in the back let out a loud ha. A woman was full on wiping away tears from laughing. Even the younger officer, who had been silent this entire time, snorted so loudly I thought Karen's head might actually explode. Karen turned on her heel, her entire body vibrating with rage. "You're all insane," she spat, before storming toward her car. Just wait until the Homeowners Association hears about this. The older officer sighed, rubbing his temples. I really don't get paid enough for this. I stepped closer to the lemonade stand and pulled out $1. I'll take 2 cups. The kid grinned. Coming right up. As I took a sip, watching Karen's car peel out of the neighborhood in a fit of indignant rage, I exhaled deeply. The lemonade was a little too sweet, but honestly, this was the best damn dollar I'd ever spent. The moment the second officer stepped out of the patrol car, I knew this was about to take a turn for the glorious. Karen, still fuming over the ticket, squared her shoulders and turned to the younger cop like he was a lifeline to a rapidly sinking ship. Officer, she huffed, dramatically adjusting her sunglasses atop her head. I demand to speak to your superior. This man, she gestured wildly at the other officer, is clearly abusing his power. The younger cop exchanged a glance with his partner, who just pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered something under his breath that was probably not appropriate for police protocol. Then, with the deadpan delivery of someone who had endured way too much idiocy in one shift, he said, "Ma'am, he's the superior officer." For a brief, fleeting moment, Karen looked genuinely stunned. I could see the mental gymnastics happening behind her beady little eyes as she tried to process that the system she had so fervently worshipped had, in fact, turned against her. But, true to form, Karen rebounded quickly. Well, she sniffed, that just proves there's corruption in the police department. I swear I heard a vein pop in the older officer's forehead. Ma'am, he ground out. You are seconds away from being charged with obstructing an officer. I suggest you walk away before you escalate this further. Karen gasped like he had just physically assaulted her with his words. Me. Escalating? Oh, no. You are the one escalating this by refusing to do your duty. Do you even know how much I pay in taxes? At this, a man in the crowd who I recognized as Bill from down the street couldn't help himself. Lady, you don't pay enough taxes to have a cop personally assigned to your first world problems. The crowd erupted into laughter, and I actually had to bite my knuckle to keep from joining in. Even the younger officer let out a quiet chuckle before composing himself. Karen, now resembling an overfilled tea kettle moments from bursting, looked at the officer like she expected him to throw Bill to the ground and cuff him for disrespecting a taxpayer. Instead, the cop simply sighed and extended his hand toward the kid's lemonade stand. What's the price, son? The kid, eyes still wide with shock at his accidental role in this Shakespearean tragedy, stammered, 50 cents. The officer fished in his pocket, pulled out a crisp dollar bill, and handed it over. I'll take 2. The silence was deafening. Karen's jaw unhinged. The younger officer, not to be outdone, pulled out his own wallet and handed the kid another bill. Keep the change. And that? That was it. That was the moment Karen realized she had lost. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. For the first time since this circus started, she was completely speechless. No yelling, no shrieking, no empty threats about lawyers or city ordinances. Just pure, helpless indignation. The officer took a sip of his lemonade, nodded approvingly, then turned back to Karen. You're free to go, ma'am. And I strongly suggest you don't waste emergency resources on nonsense again. Karen made a strangled noise somewhere between a scoff and a sob before snatching her purse and storming back to her car. The door slammed, the tires screeched. And just like that, she was gone. The crowd erupted into applause. The older officer shook his head, chuckling to himself. I really need to start carrying a body cam for this neighborhood. I clapped the kid on the shoulder, grinning. You just made $100 today, easy. The kid, still in shock, looked down at the wad of cash in his hands. Then, with the air of someone who had just become an urban legend, he whispered, cool. Honestly, cool doesn't even begin to describe it. The moment Karen's car peeled out of the neighborhood, tires screeching like a banshee's final cry, the entire block seemed to exhale in unison. It was as if a storm had passed, one filled with shrill accusations, unwarranted police calls, and an unholy amount of misplaced outrage. For a second, there was silence. And then, a slow clap. Bill, the neighborhood's self-appointed spectator, started it. One clap, then another. Soon, the entire crowd was cheering like they'd just witnessed the finale of the greatest underdog story ever told. The kid, our local lemonade mogul, looked around, eyes still wide as if he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. The sheer absurdity of it all must have finally clicked because, after a beat, he let out a breathless laugh. That was insane, kid, I said, shaking my head in awe. You just survived a Category 5 Karen. The older officer, still standing near the lemonade stand, downed the rest of his drink like he was washing away the memory of the last 20 minutes. I need a vacation, he muttered, crumpling the cup and tossing it into a nearby trash can. The younger officer, still smirking, patted the kid on the shoulder. "Good work, son. Keep the lemonade flowing." Then, turning to the rest of us, he added, "And if she calls 911 again over something this stupid, just tell her the Homeowners Association hotline is available 24/7. The crowd chuckled, but I could tell everyone was thinking the same thing. Karen wasn't done. She never was. And sure enough, as I scrolled through my phone later that night, a new post popped up on the neighborhood Facebook page. Karen P. "It is outrageous that law enforcement refused to uphold the law today. What is this world coming to when anyone can set up a business without proper permits? I will be taking this to the city council. This is not over." I choked on my drink, laughing so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Oh, Karen. Sweet, ridiculous, predictable Karen. But here's the thing, she was right about one thing. This wasn't over. Because by the next morning, something glorious happened. The lemonade stand? Sold out. Neighbors kept stopping by, dropping extra dollars in the kid's cup. Some didn't even take lemonade, they just wanted to support him. Someone printed out a sign that read, "Officially endorsed by local law enforcement," and taped it to the table. And just when I thought it couldn't get any better, I overheard the kid's mom whisper to him, "We're getting you that bike today, buddy." Not all heroes wear capes. Some just sell lemonade and unwittingly trigger Karen meltdowns. As for me, I sat back on my porch, sipping the last bit of my now slightly warm lemonade, and smiled. This was, without a doubt, the most entertaining Tuesday I'd had in years.